What's good, everybody? Welcome to Origin Story, the podcast that interviews creators about where they came from to understand how they got here. My name's Phillip Russell, and I'm with my co-host,
Ben Thorp.
And welcome to Season 2. It's been a long time coming. Ben and I are super hyped to kind of finally get these episodes out there because we've been recording for a couple months now. And Ben, how you feeling?
I feel amazing. You know, we've been getting a lot of hate mail recently, Phil, with people furiously emailing in. They're like, where's the new content? Aren't you guys supposed to be content creators? Where's the episodes? I'm getting sick and tired of waiting. And you know what? Haters, we're here, baby.
We are back. You know, the hate mail can't stop us. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we've been saying that the second season is going to be coming for a long time now. And it's like, when we're in the background making these episodes, because we basically, to give you kind of behind the scenes look, you know, we try to record a bunch of interviews over the course of a couple months, and then that way when we release a season, like, we have a little bit of a buffer, you know, because Ben and I are busy guys and we need some time in between episodes to make sure everything's right. So, you know, we've been hyping it for a long time, and I'm really excited for like all the different conversations we've been having. So it's good to finally feel like it's going to be out there again.
Yeah, we want to assure people that we're not the, I don't know, George R.R. Martin, the Team Cherry of video of podcasts, right? Like, stuff is coming. We're working on stuff. It's coming.
Yeah, we will not be the Hollow Knight of indie podcasts.
Rip to Silk Song.
But yeah, I mean, how about we just jump right in there? This first conversation we had was with Matthew Milia. He is a singer-songwriter, and he is the front man for a Michigan-based band called Frontier Ruckus. We talked to him about his new solo album, Kigo Harbor. And we wanted to start with this episode because I think in a lot of ways, the conversation that we had with Matthew influenced so much of ultimately what we talked to other creators about, which was like this idea of what we've been calling the reality of the dream, or like, what is it actually like to try and make kind of like the dream job or the dream thing you want to be doing happen and make it like a practical reality.
Yeah, I feel like we were having this conversation with Matthew, and for context, we were having this actually last year. This was like almost at the tail end of season 1, and then we were like, oh, actually, this ends up being the thesis statement in a lot of ways of a lot of the interviews that we've had since. But he got pretty frank about just like how hard it was to be on tour, to balance getting to do the art and the uncertainty of your day-to-day life when you're a touring musician, and then being like, okay, how do I make art work with my life and make that balance jive a little bit better? And I think for both of us, obviously that resonated a lot, both because I think we are also in the midst of trying to figure out where's the balance between art in our lives. Mm-hmm. How do we do things that feel like they have value and feel like they fit in? I think that the basics here are that we're both in the midst of a midlife crisis, and we've used this podcast to just go around and talk to people and say like, hey, is it okay that we're just like sad all the time and don't feel like our lives have any meaning or purpose, and we don't know how to make art work within them?
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like the more and more the episodes are becoming like this therapy session where we talk to people who are like marginally older than us, asking them like, so like, how do we make this thing work? How do we do this thing? Yeah, I think that talking to Matthew especially was really eye-opening in terms of thinking about how you can, you know, make art and still make a living, you know, for being frank. And I mean, I think everybody who's listened to the show,
and maybe you don't, right?
Yeah,
maybe you don't, and maybe you try to find a space for where are those outlets within my life, right? Which is also a conversation that we've been having.
Yeah, and I think like based off of our conversation that we had at the end of season, or like our little interlude episode where we were kind of talking about like, hey, here's what it's like to make a podcast like Origin Story. Here are some of the struggles or like anxieties that we have making a show like this, where like we want people to listen, but we also want it to be fun and like fulfilling for us. I think that a lot of the conversations you'll hear this season revolve around that. And yeah, I mean, this conversation, we jump into all things around like making a sustainable creative life, Milia's songwriting process. We talk about stories from the road, the suburbs, and how maybe they aren't bad, or maybe they're just kind of Lynchian. So we jump into a lot of things, and we won't spoil all the conversation. So how about we just jump right into it?
Let's go. Matthew Milia is a singer-songwriter out of Detroit, Michigan. He's released 5 albums as part of his band Frontier Ruckus and 2 as part of his self-titled solo project, Lone in St. Hugo and Keego Harbor. Milia's latest album, Keego Harbor, was released this year in 2021. Thanks for coming on the show and talking to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, the album circles around memories of the town that you grew up in, Keego Harbor, and concludes with a song that imagines returning to Keego Harbor in a really, I think, hopeful way. In Keego Harbor, it's all possible. Maybe talk about why you are kind of fixated on returning to this almost magical reimagining of your hometown.
Well, I think it's something more than just like pat nostalgia. I hope it is. I think I almost use Keego Harbor as like a metaphor for something, almost like a fantasy for. I mean, it does have a nostalgic element to it. Something pure, something just anti-adulthood. I mean, so much abrupt and unexpected complexity comes into life with adulthood. And I don't know, Keego Harbor represents to me. I'm just obsessed. I'm obsessed with locality. Confinement, the fact that it's a defined place with borders, something about that is less overwhelming to me. That like a town, a locality, it contains a finite amount of stuff, where life, in reality, contains an infinite amount of scary, often confusing and threatening sort of elements, if that makes any sense. I don't know. So that's I like books like Winesburg, Ohio, where it's just kind of a generational tales, because my parents met in Keego Harbor, so there's all these. The record talks about inheritance of qualities that we might like about ourselves or not. It's a very honest look at coming to age, and also the things we inherit through age that are outside of our control.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm rambling a bit.
No. And I think you did. So in an interview I was reading with you with the Detroit Metro Times, you kind of talked about the ways in which kind of songwriting for you can make memories more manageable. And I think you're kind of saying that in your answer too, that there's this way in which like confining this space and kind of blotting out what the boundaries look like, it makes it easier to kind of grapple with the thing. And you use this word agency, and maybe you can talk about that just a little bit more. The way that it's giving you both agency over your own life now and your memories.
Yeah, that's why I write songs in the first place, to codify existence and reality. And yeah, I don't know. Because you give shape to something that's otherwise amorphous, and like you said with Keego Harbor, I feel comfortable investigating its residents and its emotions and all of its contents thoroughly, because I know that it's kind of something of my own control. Like when I write a song, I define the parameters, so I feel safe exploring it, ad nauseum.
That's interesting. I mean, I when we were talking to Jeff Pianki a couple weeks ago, I mentioned how some of Jeff's songs remind me a bit of people like you or Andy Schaaf, who kind of use these very narratively focused or narratively centered lyrical songs to kind of work through whatever themes are happening. Something that I find kind of interesting, though, that separates you from maybe Andy Schaaf, if I were to use like his latest album, Neon Skyline, which kind of centers around a bar and kind of extrapolates outwards. I'd almost consider like Keego Harbor. It's like the lyrics are so exacting and almost maximalist that you're kind of painting, you know, the entire town. I'm curious what the process was like approaching this record, or maybe your solo projects in general. Is this something where you...
Yeah, well, I'm obsessed with specificity, and it should be pretty obvious that I write these songs first and foremost for myself. I just full them chock full of emotional triggers and gratifications from me that. So I feel no pressure or incumbents to be minimal or to be sparing. I write these songs for myself. They're self-therapy, and Frontier Ruckus, incrementally with every record has become, you know, more laden with specificity. But with my solo work, it's obviously I'm even more untethered. I have beautiful collaborators in Frontier Ruckus that help balance me, and that's why Frontier Ruckus is a very distinct catalog. Like those songs are, a Frontier Ruckus song is sort of a different beast than a Matthew Milia song. There is a lot of overlap. I'm writing about, you know, the same geographical places and with very similar tropes and metaphorical devices. But yeah, specificity. I don't know. I'm trying to convey very universal things, like I said before, like parental inheritance, the fragility of familial love, domestic spaces, and economic disparity. The way, you know, one suburb is known as a rich suburb or a middle class, or like in the way in Metro Detroit, all these little realms of like perceived personalities that these townships have are actually, you know, they all mingle as one kind of organism. So there's tons of themes I'm trying to cram into these songs, universal things, but the more specifically I write, the more effective I feel like getting in that direction. I guess my main tenet as a songwriter is that the universal is housed within the particular, and the more specifically I just beat that particular, you know, just approach it from every direction, you know, find as many metaphors for it as possible, you know, unabashedly just verbally investigate it. The more I get closer to that universal thing that no one will ever actually harness. I don't have any delusions that I will one day take all of the cosmos and put it into a rhyme about a bar and grill or something. But it feels damn good to try. So if nothing else, it's like a pastime or preoccupation that fills me with a lot of pleasure. It's like the writing of the song is my favorite part.
I feel like you're getting close though with, you know, because I mean, I think about, you know, I went to Michigan State. Ben and I both did back in, I was there from 2012 to 2015. And, you know, that was around the time when Eternity of Dimming had came out from Frontier Ruckus. And, you know, as I was saying before we got on, like I live in Seattle now, and I find myself listening to that album and being transported back in a way that's so hyper specific that it's a really interesting quality. And I think, yeah, just that, you know, again, my words, not yours, that maximalist or whatever you want to call it, lyricism, I think lends to, you know, that quality, which I think is different from maybe when somebody's talking about just like a generalized, we're talking about Michigan and I'm transported back to Michigan. That's not what I mean. I mean, I'm like transported back to the garbage can outside of, Woody's or something like that. That's what I feel like when I'm listening to some tracks on that album.
Thank you. I take that as a huge compliment. I think that, there's so much beautiful art in the world that isn't very specific, that's more impressionistic and broad strokes, that leave a lot to interpretation. And I love art like that. But when I listen to any given Frontier Ruckus record or solo record, I know exactly what I was feeling. It doesn't leave any it's time travel for me. It's teleportation, and sometimes that's very nurturing. It's just a warm feeling it just helps me gauge where I've been and where I am now and where I'm headed. It's just it's almost like a very utilitarian, practical device for me personally. But that at the same time, like I've been shocked by how well people in distant places that have never experienced, Keego Harbor or Oakland County or southeastern Michigan, there's like this beautiful alchemy or like translation that people do. Like the first time we played in England, people were singing along to the songs as if I was singing about Oxfordshire or York or I don't know. It's like that is that universal leaking out of the container, I think, which is
yeah. And I think you said that really well, which is like, when you get more specific, there is a weird way in which it does allow people to engage with it in that specific way, to feel the thing that you're getting at, because it is kind of so laser focused.
Because it's impossible to live a life void of those specifics. So everyone can kind of shuffle the words around, the proper nouns and whatnot, and just and there's something beautiful about it being someone else's proper nouns, because it implies this human relation, this kinship, sort of.
On boiling coffee, the asthma in our lungs burnt away so harshly. Back when we were elated from the moment we're created, to anticipated we'd be abruptly old and caffeinated.
Can you kind of talk about what it was like to write this album alongside your wife? I mean, I think a lot of the songs feel in some ways like they might be love songs, and kind of grappling with, I guess, your feelings specifically. And so, what is it like to write a song that's about a person who is like right there with you writing this album, I guess?
Well, like I said, each record I can teleport back to exactly what I was. Sorry, I live. Very loud cars go by my house on a regular basis, but I could I remember exactly where I was with each writing of each record, and that is certainly true for my romantic state for each record, because other than geography and family and all those other themes, obviously my romantic situation is very predominant with each record. So I'm looking at the record right now, trying to remember the songs that are on here. So I'm in a great place. I mean, I met the love of my life, and I'm more fulfilled in that regard than I ever have been, or ever will be. So I don't know that I'm trying to. I want to give you a more interesting answer than I'm just in a good place. I mean, but it's kind of a novelty for me, because I've always, Sitcom Afterlife is a Frontier Ruckus record that was very bitter. It was almost like my blood on the tracks, I see it as. It was very much like a breakup record, and I look back now and like those emotions were so misgiven and like comically exaggerated that I would almost cringe if I didn't have such empathy for my past self. But I just feel like now I'm in a very honest place, because I don't know, when you settle down in the right way and you just let life happen, I don't know, it's just, there's a beautiful naturality to it, and nothing's forced, and you feel so supported. And Lauren's voice on this record, the aural fulfillment it provides, you can hear the balance that I feel emotionally, I hope.
Yeah, what was well, first off, I think it's like, I like that answer of just, I'm in a good place. That is interesting. I think something that's interesting about the albums, we could say they're love songs or whatnot, but what makes them kind of lush is that it isn't just that fluffy, like, I'm happy kind of response to how we deal with love, right?
The lyrics are still full of, verging on morose, realistic, unflinching looking into the life's potential for tragedy and disaster. I mean, the lyrics like, somehow it doesn't make you cry to know the junk mail you and I will still receive long after we've both been long dead. I mean, like, it's like but now it's like I feel like I have a teammate where I'm like looking that potential disaster in the face and being like, so what? Like, what's the worst you can do? Like, life's granted me such beauty and such, I feel like such a rare fulfillment that none of that future grief or potential tragedy really brings me down that much anymore. I take such comfort in the beautiful things.
I want to ask you specifically about, because I think you're saying exactly, you're teeing up one of the questions, which is like, I was reading the lyrics to Me and My Sweetheart, and I felt, don't let me put kind of words in your mouth, but I felt like there was this nod towards both kind of the mundanity of, or potential mundanity of domestic life, but also the idea of cataclysm. And I was trying to make sense of whether or not, because you've got a line about the quarantine, and so I was like, is the cataclysm about, that there's always this potential of kind of disaster within relationships, or is that about the kind of exterior, like, oh, we're also writing this in the midst of a global pandemic?
I think most of the songs were finished before the pandemic really took effect. It was recorded all during the pandemic. But you touched on something very true to my priorities. That I'm obsessed with antithetical things mingling contiguously, like mundanity and cataclysm, like the middle, like suburbia and the inner city. Like, these things that people see as disparate entities are actually one part of one organism. Like, and I love domestic mundanity. I take such comfort in it. I don't know. Maybe I'm such a product of 90s suburbia, but like, I don't know. It's in my DNA to just want to cozy up into the comforts of, for lack of a better word, corporate comfort. I don't know, like, consumerism. Like, I can see I work in advertising now, and that's part of the blueprint of my settling down. And there are definitely shameful aspects of, like, I can see it I like to think I can see it from a somewhat objective angle, where and see all the injurious aspects of consumerism. But we're so one and the same as a culture. I could even agree that it would benefit society to divorce ourselves from it completely, but I don't see that really as a practical reality in the near future. But so in a poetic, aesthetical sense, I own that crutch of consumerism and try to look at it in like an aesthetic. In terms of poetry, there's a lot of interesting feelings, a lot of interesting feels in that world, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but and I'm going off on like a socioeconomic angle, but
no, well, I think you're getting at something that Ben and I are both really interested in, not only in this album, but it's true in Alone at St. Hugo. Like, if I were to talk about myself, like I grew up in the suburbs in Grand Rapids and Ada, and before that I lived in Troy, Michigan, and it's interesting, I think, listening to the two solo records in particular, because I think today a lot of people would view the suburbs or suburban life as a negative, or like it's a derogatory thing. Something that's interesting to me about your work is this angle of whether it's imagining or simply presenting suburbia or suburban spaces in a positive light, or whatever adjective we want to use there. I mean, I think for me, I have a complicated relationship with the suburbs. Like I'm a black man. I grew up as like the only black family in my neighborhood, in this fairly affluent neighborhood. And but at the same time, like I look back at that time in the suburbs as like a time of joy, and I had a lot of fun. And like there's a lot of times today where I look at it and I'm like, that was pretty nice. You know, I'm curious, like how you approach that topic in your own work and like your own relationship to suburbia. Do you find that there's a friction there, or is it mainly like a positive thing?
Everything you said is so right on. I don't see it as positive or pejorative. I see it as I'm after a certain realism. It's like a David Lynch movie, like in Blue Velvet, like with the slow motion of the fire truck or whatever. You see like the beautiful glistening green lawn in someone's front yard, and then like the slow tension-filled zoom into like the worms that are crawling under the sod. You know, it's like it's the pendulum swing of both sides of those. It's the whole, because none of these landscapes are monolithic. They're so complex, and that's what's interesting and difficult and challenging about them. If you could just label any one way of life as evil or moralistic or healthy, it would be a lot easier to excise ourselves of the ones that aren't working. But there's beauty and evil and you know, inextricably bound up in all of it. But yeah, like Alone at St. Hugo, my first record. So St. Hugo is, I came from, in the scheme of things, a very privileged background. Like St. Hugo's I went to Catholic school for 13 years. I went to St. Hugo from kindergarten through 8th grade in Bloomfield Hills, which is one of the wealthiest municipalities in the country, I believe. And yeah, you know, and I came from a sturdily middle-class upbringing. My family didn't have a ton of money, but I went to school with kids that had a lot of money. Like, so like even in the microcosm, as a kid, you can't see beyond that. And I felt poor as hell. Like, and I was embarrassed of it. And I was very insecure that I was dropped off at school in a Chevy Cavalier that we inherited from my grandparents, and like we had rust on our cars, and like I thought we were impoverished. So it's funny, like even looking back now, it still is a major part of my psychology of like a certain victimhood, because you can't see past, like that is your reality, however it's framed in the context of your little bubble. Then you go outside of that and you see, wow, I'm so fortunate, I'm so privileged. But it's just an infinitely nuanced system, and there's emotion. The humanity on all sides of it is just endlessly interesting to me. So it's the humanity that is squeezed out of all these really weird systems that have organically sprouted throughout American history.
Okay, so I want to push you just a little bit, just because I think like, you know, when I think about a David Lynch, or I think about even an Arcade Fire Suburbs, or I think about, like, I think the balance in some ways is more towards, you know, a kind of negativity or a deep skepticism of the facade of the suburbs. And I think while you're right that like your depiction is not pure nostalgia, it is not, like, there is nuance and there is complication in there. It does feel on balance more positive than I think a lot of, like, I guess mainstream or projections of what the suburbs are. And so I guess I want to zero zero in on like what that is for you.
Well, like I'm a faulty narrator in a sense. Like I'm not, from song to song, from verse to verse, I'm not really a cohesive, unified subject or whole. Like and I grant myself that license, it's like, because I hope you can hear the feeling around in the dark that I'm doing as I'm writing the song. Like, I hope that has that quality of like, what's the word? Fallibility. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, and it's so much of it is dealing in memory. And I think a beautiful aspect of memory is its faultiness. I actually have lyrics specifically about that, like, and different family members looking at one traumatic event in completely different lenses. I sing about family trauma a lot, but it's also often through the guise of like a beautiful daydream, or I try to give it like a dream-like quality, because going back to like polarities mingling, acceptable, or so yeah. Like I'm a faulty. Sorry, there's something else I was trying to say about that.
No, you're good. You're good. I guess I was just thinking, like, I got done with the album, and especially I think the final track, and I'm like, damn, wish I could go to Kego Harbor. Sounds like a sounds like a nice place.
Yeah. Even though the last lyrics are, someday I think I'll move back to Kego Harbor, rent an upstairs room where the pear trees bloom for the barber, and though they smell like death, it's the sweetest breath in Kego Harbor. See, like, even that, like, and that's a twist from the way the song started. There was no mention of death in the beginning of the song, but like David Lynch, I'm trying to lace all of the positive, dreamy iconography with little hints of disaster, mortality, and trauma. I really get off on, and I think for the most part, Lynch errs on the side of the dreamy and the positive, but that lacing it with all that darkness there's something beautiful about that.
No, I'm glad you brought up Lynch. I think there's something to be said about the overuse of like Lynchian or whatever. But something that I was thinking about with your work is how much it kind of reminds me of Lynch. Like a lyric that always stands out in my mind, and I might butcher the exact part of it, but in her eyelashes are like needles or something like that. Like this kind of the polarity of like something that's supposed to be beautiful with this kind of this danger that could exist. And I'm curious, like I'm interested in like what you were like what was your relationship like with music growing up? Were you somebody, like, even as a kid? I mean, I think it's fair to say you have a prolific catalog of songs. I'm curious, has music always been something that you were fascinated by, or was there like some kind of moment where you the switch flipped?
I fell in love with songwriters through music my dad played for me, chiefly Bob Dylan and Neil Young. People that change from album to album, and there's like a journey, and the discography becomes takes on a life of its own, and it's really a journey, and there's no rules. So the singer-songwriters of the 70s, like Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, Paul Simon, all these people that are in it for the long game, like I'm obsessed with the format of the album, which is a dying art. I understand that things change. It's just the format that I consider myself a purveyor of, and that's the format that I pursue as a writer. I think it's a beautiful novelistic sort of format that is becoming lost.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny you bring that up, because Ben and I were just talking last week. We interviewed Cautious Clay, who's like an alternative R&B artist, and somebody who has like millions of listens every month. But if you look at his album, the album we talked to him about, it's like there's a skit like halfway through the album, and if you look at the amount of listens or whatever on Spotify, it's like each song has a minimum of, let's say, 500,000 listens, and then like the skit has 1,000 listens, and it's just like, it's interesting.
What does that tell you?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like the album, because I'm like you, I really love like just listening to an album all the way through. And when I saw that, I was like, man, that must be like a pretty like depressing kind of feeling, I guess, when you like kind of make those kind of artistic moves, and then it's like,
it's just a different art form. I mean, those people are approaching music for different reasons, and it's very valid. I'm not disputing its validity or what their goals are. It's just not, for me, even my whole catalog is an album. It's all interconnected. There are references. It's an intertextual world, and that gratifies me immensely. There might even be things that only I detect, but there are references to Keego Harbor, to Eternity of Dimming, to the things going all the way back. There are Easter eggs, if you want to call them that. It's all connected, because life is it's just it is just a product of the function songwriting plays, and it's a mirror of my life. So life is this ongoing text where that amorphously blends together. So my catalog is too. It's just an extension of that.
We were born in the same hospital, about 4 years apart. Brought back to modest homes in the shadows of the soccer domes. Our mothers clung to cordless phones as the summers all began to drum by.
How do you see the difference between the songs that go to kind of your solo project versus the ones that are going to end up with Frontier Ruckus? And like, is there a songwriting phase where you're like, this belongs with Frontier? Or
no, I just write so many damn songs that I could use a few new buckets to put them in, and but due to that organization, I would say 8 years ago I started falling in love more with power pop, like 90s, very melodic, like tambourine shaking, hand claps, harmonies, like Teenage Fan Club or the Lemonheads or Matthew's Suite, like just because I'd always focused so much on lyrics and chord progressions. I think the art of the chord progression is another dying art. Everything is just so focused on ambiance and texture, which is great. I mean, there's some beautiful records being produced that sound really cool, but like the actual underlying, it goes back to those 70s songwriters, like the progression of the chordal changes is what drives the emotional import ahead. So Frontier Ruckus has been increasingly, the songs have become more increasingly, I think, chordally interesting, but my solo stuff has some of my poppier, I think, I mean, less people have heard them, which is ironic that the songs are poppier. Frontier Ruckus tends to be more, I would say, on the whole, more minor key, more organic, like acoustic instruments, and I love that. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to return to. Just banjo, Davey and Zach, with trumpet and musical saw, just very tactile, metallic, wooden, very natural instruments, and it's very. Oftentimes, recording-wise, it's just guys playing in a room without paying any heed to bleed through microphones. Like the Orient Songbook was all recorded live in a room, and you can hear the drums coming through the guitar mics, and there's something beautiful about that. I mean, it's very naturalistic. Matthew Milia songs like Alone at St. Hugo and Keego Harbor was all recorded to a click track. Initially, every song was played live with me and an acoustic guitar, and Ben Collins, who's my collaborator and all that stuff, on drums. But then we would, do overdubs. It's very much more like a ELO inspired, or like Fleetwood Mac. Like even on Keego Harbor, all the drums, even the drum parts were played separately. All the cymbals were played in one pass, and all the snare and the kick and the toms were played in a separate pass. So it was very precise and more like 70s, 90s era, like power pop tricks, just to satisfy that sort of like Rembrandt's, like the Friends theme song or something like that, where it's just like ear candy. Because I love that goes back to mingling polarities, because I love a candy drenched kind of just like beautifully melodic sonic texture paired with like devastating lyrics about how I'm gonna die. There's some like it's kind of like that Lynchian thing again. It's just like something beautiful with that brightness and the darkness layered together.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think a lot of what you're saying speaks to me in terms of like form and how form influences whatever the product or the content is that we're making. Like, I'm not a musician. I went to school for creative writing and things like that. But yeah, something that I noticed about Alone at St. Hugo when I saw that when it came out was, yeah, that pop focus. Like, I think of like Alive at the Same Time or Abruptly Old and Caffeinated or...
You know, it's a weird thought. Like, I mean, those are still like 6-minute long songs. I don't know how to write like a radio hit. Like, I never did. And so it's almost like, and it's kind of morbidly fascinating that even when I'm trying to write a pop song, I can't keep it under 5 minutes because I just have so much I want to say. And like, why would I not write a fifth verse, or why would I repeat myself in the chorus when I could say, you know, supply new information? But there is like a lingering thought in my head, like, if I had released a song like Alive at the Same Time or Condo Lakeshore from the new record, these like really I think they're catchy songs, like in the heyday of Frontier Ruckus when we had like William Morris as an agent or like high profile managers, like maybe I would have been able to make a living through like I don't know, it's a weird thought. Not that I would have even wanted that, or if my life would have ended up in a better place or a happier place, because I very much doubt that it would have. But it's just an interesting thought, because I don't even know what the height of Frontier Ruckus was, or maybe it's in the future. But we've had like 3 managers and several booking agents and publicists, and they're always like, "Why don't you write like a love song?" Like, my first manager said. He's from North Carolina, very nice guy. But he said, "Matthew, I know you're like a poet and stuff, but like, why don't you just try a few less chords and make a few less lyrics and write a love song?" And well, actually, so you know Ryan Adams. He reached out to us during that era to produce our 3rd record, which became Eternity of Dimming, through that manager. And I was writing all the demos that became Eternity of Dimming, and he was like, Ryan Adams heard the demos because he liked Dead Malls and Nightfalls a lot. Yeah. He's like, these are just so sad. He didn't see the commercial value in them or something.
Is that fair to ask you about, like, directly? Like, I don't know. How do you think about that balance between, I don't know, like, guess like being an artist and expressing yourself, but also like, I don't know, the pull to be kind of commercially viable, and I guess.
So when that happened, I wrote the song I Met Rebecca from Eternity of Dimming specifically in a bedroom on tour in Indianapolis when I got that feedback, to try to write a more upbeat pop song, and it is not. I mean, it's minor key, and it has like a weird dream sequence in it about like murderers, and that's not why it goes back to the function of songwriting. That is not why I write songs. I like using pop music as pastiche, and that's why I reference like 90s power pop in the sonic palette. It's almost like as if I turned on a radio, like a 90s radio, like for the effect of it. Because it's a poetic device instead of like actually trying to write a hit. Like, that's my attraction to power pop, is that it's what I grew up hearing in the minivan on the way to soccer practice. There's like a poetic reason for it. It has nothing to do with success or thinking hand claps are going to make me rich. I welcome. I think any artist should welcome all that is humbling and demoralizing. There's something beautiful about the first era of an artistic career, when you're nothing but ambition and that perfect balance of vanity and naivete, where all you have is you're falling in love with your own artistic voice, and you think you can do no wrong, and you think everything you do is amazing, and because the sky is the limit. But on the other end of the hill, on the way down, is where you really get honest with yourself, and really discover who you are and what you care about. And when you write those songs, they kind of mean a lot more.
Well, I'm glad that you and I've been alive at the same time. It's just the way I'm trying to say that I need you. I hope that you and I stay alive at the same time. It's just the way.
Yeah. I guess, do you see kind of the place that you are now, which sounds like stable and like you have a career, and then also music? I mean, is that a compromise, or is that something where you're like, actually, I feel more myself? This is more wholly, Matt Milia.
I think artists should welcome compromise. I think it does a body good. I don't know. Yeah, like I tried for a decade to I did make a living. I survived for a decade as nothing but a touring musician, playing over 200 dates a year, and going to Europe twice a year, 3 times a year, and playing a whole gradient of show, like playing main stage at English festivals with like Bell and Sebastian and Frightened Rabbit, and then coming back to Jacksonville, Florida, and getting paid nothing but like a case of water because no one came. That kept it interesting, actually. Like never being able to put your finger on how well you're doing, or like it was very exciting, and to share it with people who are very much your brothers in a little van and just driving around. I feel so fortunate to have spent my 20s doing that, if not for nothing other than just the experiential bounty that I think that's why I am, and I segued into advertising as a writer, which, I mean, that's a whole another podcast. But the only reason I am excelling at this job in advertising as a writer, I think I'm doing pretty well with no experience, is because of the experiential, for lack of a better worldly data that I accumulated in just chasing nothing but a dream for a decade, and having very little to show for it at the end except a humble and amazingly dedicated following. It's not a lot. It's not thousands and thousands of people, but the people that I'm regularly contacted by people who tell me that my songs changed their lives, or like got them through some really unbearable periods, stuff like that. I wouldn't trade for show business. I mean, I think even now, like especially post-pandemic, like show business is unrecognizable from the MySpace era that I came out of. Our first record came out in 2008, and I would say Dead Malls and Nightfalls in 2010, and Eternity of Dimming in 2013 was kind of when we had the machinery going full blast. And then Anna Birch returned, which was amazing, and for Sitcom Afterlife and Into the Kingdom. But I mean, Enter the Kingdom, which is a record I'm super proud of, came out in 2017, and that is so long ago now.
Yeah.
Do you remember thinking about 20s? I remember thinking about 2017 as like, oh, that was just a year or two ago. Or like, I don't know. And things are moving so quickly. Obviously, like, I don't want to be the geriatric millennial, like disparaging technology or whatever, but
no, I mean, even when I was. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't miss touring. Like I said, writing songs. Luckily, I'm a sucker for Domestic Life because it's the only comfort I have left. But touring was wonderful. I just really feel like I got it out of my system, and I gleaned so much from it. I just assumed stay inside and keep writing songs for myself, if no one else.
Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, the whole angle of like getting into advertising, and I mean, for me, like after Michigan State, I ended up doing, over the course of 4 years, doing 2 master's degrees in creative nonfiction writing and like teaching English and things like that, thinking that I would become a professor one day and everything. And, now I work in marketing and it's like, in some ways, and I just started doing that like a year ago. And it's interesting thinking about my own creative process with my own personal work and navigating that with my day job. And I'm curious, I actually am kind of curious, like what that is for you. Like have you found that your process has changed now that you've kind of taken on this role that maybe demands some of that?
My songwriting process?
Yeah, or just music in general. Yeah.
Well, like you said, Ben, like you used the word compromise. That's not a bad word for this. I think it's more like recalibration, and I think that's so healthy. Like you have to constantly keep recalibrating what makes you happy, and it's usually very simple things that make you happy. And it's very easy to be drunk on your own dream and to not stay up to date with it and ask yourself if that's even what you still want anymore. Because especially in show business, in show, I feel like I should have a big cigar.
Hey, baby.
Yeah. When we lost one manager, he said, "Matthew, it's not show. That's why it's not show. That's why it's show business and not show friendship."
Oof! Jesus Christ!
I know, right? So it's understandable why I don't miss it so much. It was so many gross aspects, but. Yeah, I haven't written a song in a long time, but that's not really because I'm in a new lifestyle so much as my process is like crop rotation. Like I write for like 2 years and just collect and then I record it and then I enter the pathos laden world of trying to release that music to any sort of like. I still try, like Keego Harbor that just came out is like the record I'm most proud of in my entire life, and I'm trying to navigate this post-apocalyptic industry where I have, I had I'm coming out of a semi-successful career where I have lots of, or I believed I had lots of, friends, journalists, music writers, or publicists, labels. Video session. It's all unrecognizable. And each new record I tried to put out, and like, it's such the diminishing return aspects of it is, you'd cry if you didn't laugh. Like and luckily I'm a sucker for human pathos, and my own especially, because I kind of get off on it masochistically. Like I see myself just making continually better records and lesser and less people hearing them. Something about that gratifies me in a morbid way. But I'm looking forward to getting back. I have a whole nother solo record written. So I think for this record, I'm going to go back to just recording it. Like even Fuckboys Get the Blues, just like really primitive recording, like bedroom demos. Because I've done thanks to Ben Collins, who's this amazing musician and producer. Him and I made the last 2 solo records together. That to me, they feel like the zenith of how hi-fi. I mean, they were made in a small room in Ypsilanti to a tape machine, but they sound to me like really well-conceived, polished documents.
Yeah.
Very thoroughly, very meticulously arranged. And I kind of, for this next batch of songs, which are increasingly specific, increasingly encyclopedic and dense, I kind of just want to record them in like kind of a ramshackle way on my bedroom floor. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing next. Hopefully I get to a point where I have no songs left that I need to record and I can write some new ones. Because it'll be interesting to see if I still can. I always, every time I've gone back to that well, I've been able to create or invent a new era. So I'm hoping that's still the case.
Roads and damn coupons in the after rain, smell that I can't explain, petrichor mingled in your hair. You look so blissfully high after you've had yourself a good cry. I know that you are mine.
No, I mean, I appreciate that. I think Ben and I have talked a lot lately, especially just, I think, we both are writers and write on the side, but, we're collaborating on this podcast where we're talking to folks like you about, like, their creative work. And I think something that Ben and I are navigating a lot right now is like you were saying, with like releasing a thing and then like getting people to listen, and like that agonizing process of like having to like shout off on the mountaintop, like listen to me or whatever, and like figuring out, like you're saying, you know, the tent poles that you need to make it satisfying for you, as opposed to like hoping for whatever it is, the metrics that you make up in your head, right?
I mean, we can say all the obvious things. It's so saturated. Everyone with a microphone and a Wi-Fi connection has a podcast, and you know, everyone with a Bandcamp account has a band, and they're all pretty good. I mean, like something that this democratization of media has proven is, I mean, there's a lot of talented people out there. Like, the human race is freaking talented. I mean, everyone's got it's almost like everyone has an individualistic voice and something to offer, because that's true. You know, it's like, it's just everyone has a microphone now. So even in we were like late MySpace generation. I mean, Davey and I started playing together in like early 2000 at Brother Rice, all male Catholic high school out in the affluent Detroit suburbs. But by the time we were actually considering it as a career, when I graduated from Michigan State in 2008, and we got our first booking agent and just hit the road, like, there weren't nearly as many bands. There were, if you were somewhat interesting and had a, you know, like a novel approach to what you were doing, you could make, you know, inroads on some sort of music career. It's so interesting. Like, right when the Orient Songbook came out is when Mumford and Sons and the Lumineers and the Avett Brothers. I mean, the Avett Brothers manager was our first manager, but it's like, that's when I started to realize how hard this was actually going to be. Like, because I really don't share anything in common with those bands other than a banjo, but it completely pigeonholed us for like a couple years as like part of that, like stomping on the ground, like floor on the floor, like anthemic, like kick drum at the front of the stage. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not, back to the function of songwriting. That's not why I wrote songs. I wasn't trying to write arena anthems with folk undertones. I was just, you know, I was trying to sing songs about Pontiac, Michigan. So, but like, you know, I realized that my career was out of my hands, and like, maybe there was almost something liberating in that lack of control. But then eventually I wanted to get back to a place where I did have the agency, and that unfortunately entailed almost completely leaving the music industry or any aspirations of being a part of it. But not to down your guys' I mean, well, you guys are doing it.
No, because I think that's,
I feel like such a bummer.
No, I think that is exactly. I think that is exactly it, which is like, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but like I see it in this way where it's like, and I think Phil teed it up exactly that way too, where it's like, well, what is the value in it for me? And I think at the top you were saying these songs are for me at the end of the day, right? And that if you can approach it in that way where it has value for you, you know, yes, do you still want, you know, a bajillion listens on every song? Absolutely. But it can make the work of it still feel valuable, even if at the end of the day it doesn't have, you know, 2 million listens. And is that fair? Is that?
Yeah, like, I in no way like covet a million casual listens. Like, that would kind of ring hollow to me. I would love more listens, because I truly believe there's more people out there that could that my songs could resonate with in a really deep and meaningful way, and I would benefit, you know, emotionally from knowing that there's that conduit in existence, that I am reaching someone, and that you know, it's a symbiotic exchange. I feel that's my one regret. It's for lack of a better word, it's a spiritual deficiency. It's a shame. That's the thing I'm embarrassed about, that I failed kind of at not reaching more popularity, but just being an advocate, like navigating things logistically better to give my songs that chance. And sometimes I feel like I failed my songs as like a businessman or as like a performer or a salesman. Because when I talk about showbiz, I use the word because that's what I was kind of thrust into. Like when you're the front man on a stage, no matter how big or small the stage is, you have to perform the same songs every night, to be their advocate, to put on a little song and dance and like be like a carnival barker, you know. And that's a major element, a reason why I don't miss touring, because there's no doubt, at least for me personally, that over time it began to cheapen the songs that I cared so much about. How could it not? I mean,
Yeah.
you're providing facsimiles of what the original emotion was every night. There are people who are amazing performers that don't have that diminishing returns artistically, I'm sure. Some people are better at performing the songs than they are writing the songs. I think I'm a better writer than I am performer. I kind of grew into the craft of performing. I don't think I ever got phenomenal at it. I could sing my songs and mean it, and that better than anyone else could. I could sing a Matthew Milia song better than anyone else, but I don't know if that makes me a good performer. But yeah, that's, I guess, what I could say about wanting or craving more popularity. It's just sometimes I feel like I failed my pretty good songs.
I think that's
yeah.
Go ahead, Phil.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Ben and I both fuck with that. I mean, like when we left Michigan State in 2014, 2015, you know, we had kickstarted a podcast with two other friends that sent us around the country. We did this whole road trip, produced this podcast. Michigan State, you know, hosted us to do a big live show at the university. And WDET was like talking with us about like, hey, this is pretty good. And it was like this moment in podcasting where, you know, Serial had came out maybe like 6 months prior. So like podcasting really wasn't big yet. And I think Ben and I both had conversations since then of like, oh damn, we were like on the precipice of, you know, really taking off. And it's easy to get into that mindset, I guess, is what I'm getting at, of like, oh,
what if, or
yeah,
like,
you know,
Should we have kept at it for just a couple more months or just another year, and then, you know, things really could have taken off. And yeah, it's totally hard not to get into that headspace. And I think Phil and I have I'm always like, we can't, you kind of can't go there with yourself, because it's just like that what if it can be, I don't know, acidic in some ways, right?
Yep. Well, a lot, at least in my case, like a lot of the bands that did ride the wave better than I did when I had my chance, I feel like never made a second or third record sometimes, you know, like,
right.
So things work out, you know, there are so many different models. Like I said, I always respected those people that were in it for the long game. And if you look at Bob Dylan's career, it's just up and it's just spikes. You know, in the 80s, like, people wrote him off completely. Now people look back on the 80s, Dylan is like secret gems in the rough. So there are definitely different ways to gauge success, I guess would be the pat takeaway from that.
Right. Matt, you've been so great. Is there something we haven't asked you that you want to say
No.
or that you're thinking about? Yeah.
No, you guys are so thorough and thoughtful. These questions are great. Hopefully I haven't been rambling and I've been somewhat cohesive for you.
You have, you've been very cohesive. You did.
Okay.
You've been giving great answers. I really appreciate it.
I always feel so jumbled after an interview of this depth, and then afterwards, if I can make it through hearing myself ramble, I'm like, sometimes, I made a pretty good point there, but I took forever getting to it.
No, you did very, very well, and yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it. Thanks for talking to us.
It feels good to talk about, like I said, you know, work that I care a lot about. So thank you so much for having any interest in it. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, and then did I see 2022 is when the next Frontier album is coming out?
Yeah, we recorded that during the pandemic in the same, you know, with Ben Collins and Ypsilanti. So it might sound somewhat similar, but in terms of, the technology it was recorded on. But I'm really proud of this batch of songs. It is about, there's like a song called Bloomfield Marriott about, so like there are like these landmarks, but I think it's a little broader brushstrokes and a little, it's just a slightly different poetic type of device I use than Kiko. It's less specific than Kiko Harbor, and a little more. Yeah, I'm excited. We still need to mix it and stuff like that, so I'm excited to delve back into it.
Well, I don't know if you're a big on social media type of guy, but is there any like things you want to plug, like whether it be at Twitter or like where they can get Kigo Harbor? Or...
Well, because of COVID, the vinyl plants around the country are very backed up, so I don't even have the vinyl yet. So, but that is something to look forward to. I'll have it this month. A lot of people pre-ordered it, so those orders will be going out. I have it on CD already, but I hopefully, if the Delta variant actually goes away for once, I'll do a big vinyl release show. Yeah, but MatthewMilia.com, or Matthew Milia is pretty much my handle everywhere. So
Cool.
Yeah, pre-order the vinyl and it'll come out this month, depending on when this podcast comes out.
And that was our conversation with Matthew Milia about Kigo Harbor, about compromise, calibration, the suburbs. Yeah, it was a really good conversation. I think especially for me, at least, is thinking about like, hey, I work this day job. It takes a lot of creative energy that I'd like to put in other things. How can I maybe rethink my relationship to that and the art that I make outside of work?
My takeaway is that we are all barely hanging on by a thread here, and it's not just us. We're all just like moments away from the abyss.
Right. I mean, that's like the humbling thing, right? Like with these conversations, I feel more and more that you know, our struggles aren't unique. Like everybody, even the people that are like you think are like super successful and thriving and shit. It's like everybody's is doom scrolling and everybody's feeling kind of down and unsure of themselves. So like, if anything, like, good. I don't want to be the only one.
It's nice that we're all together and feeling like, you know, the world's collapsing.
It's a shared misery, you know. We also got into you know, the suburbs. I think that was an interesting conversation. We had some great questions. I think, Ben, you grilled them a little bit about like, are the suburbs good?
Phil, it's so funny. I always feel like we go back and listen to these interviews, and like in the interview, I'm like, I really held that person's feet to the fire, and then I listened to the interview back again, and I'm like, wow, I was so soft. I was just like, hey, are you sure about that? I want to make sure that you definitely feel that way.
Yeah, we're definitely like the hard-hitting journalists when we're outside of the ring, and then like once we're in there, we're like, actually, you can punch me,
say whatever you want.
You know?
No, but I do love, because there was that we've I think interviewing him, we had a lot of conversations about like, it seems like there's some nostalgia for the suburbs, as you kind of heard us talking about. Is that real? That feels different than so many other people's relationship to the suburbs and the way that they feel about the suburbs. And this album feels more nostalgic and feels like it misses that in a way that feels unique and different. And obviously, Matthew's perspective is that, yeah, there's some nostalgia there, but that is part of this more complicated and complex tapestry that includes also, feeling the kinds of horror that I feel like are more standard in depictions of a suburb.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talked about it on the episode, like this whole idea of, I think today a lot of people, probably including myself, would say that like the suburbs are kind of this dystopic feeling place, or like this idea of like this thing I don't really want to live in. It's kind of like outside of community and it's very sterile and homogenous. But I think, Matthew brings an interesting perspective into that conversation of like thinking of the suburbs as a place of possibility and of danger. And like, I think that's why that Lynchian connection works so well, that like on the surface, everything seems great, but there's always going to be those things beneath the surface that complicate things. And I think that his music does a good job of, playing in that in that wheelhouse and kind of imagining or trying to bring nuance to those kinds of locations that I think have definitely become flattened over the last couple decades.
Yeah, 100%. And two, that, I think there is that question of, is there really the stability? Thinking about the suburbs as this place where things are, standard and normalized and unmoving, and are they really those? Putting a kind of question mark at the end of that and saying, are they these spaces that don't shift and change, and are they truly stable in the way that we might think about them as being?
Yeah. So, that was our conversation with Matthew Milia. Like we said at the top of the show, I think that we really wanted to start with this episode because it will influence a lot of the other episodes you're going to be hearing this season, and some of the overall thinking that, Ben and I have had about our own art and about what the show could be. So, we really appreciate him coming on. And if you would like to listen to some of his music, we would, or at least I would definitely suggest checking out Alone at St. Hugo, which you can listen to on Spotify, or his newest album, Kigo Harbor. You can find him at his website, which is just his name, MatthewMilia.com, as well as Instagram at Matthew Milia. You can find us at originstory.show, or on Twitter at originstory_, or we're entering the Instagram game. Give us a follow at originstory.show. If you have suggestions, comments, or whatnot for us, you can send us an email at theoriginstorypod@gmail.com. Ben, where can they find you?
They can find me at sad_radio_lad. Go ahead.
You can find me at 3D Cisco, and just we're starting this new season off. I would just say, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I think Spotify also has ratings now, so everybody stresses that, but it definitely helps with getting more people to listen and helping us with exposure. And if you're not following the show on the various platforms, definitely give us a follow. For a long time, Apple Podcasts wouldn't even tell you how many followers you have, but they do now. So we know who's following us and who's not. And there's a lot more listens than there are followers. So if you could help us out with that, that'd be great. I think that's it.
Welcome back, baby.
Yeah.
We're here. We're already tired. How did it happen?
2022.
Fresh season. Fresh season.
We'll see y'all next time.